Hi, welcome everyone. This is the Maintenance Facilities Let's Get It Done training series sponsored by LeadingAge California and trained through the stall companies. I'd like to welcome you. We do these every month. They're all posted on our website at leadingageca.org. Today's webinar is recorded. Contact information, tips, reference material are all posted on our website, and we'll also share them together with you via email. I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to Walt and the stall companies. They were established back in 2000, and I will let Walt go ahead and introduce himself and get started.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? We are excited to present to you, as we shared, we are with the stall companies, and we are going to be talking to you today about budgeting for your projects. And why is that important? Because so many times we meet with various facilities, systems who have projects underway and they need our help. And when we come in to assist, we try to understand what the parameters are. And there's no better way to do that than to understand a budget for the project. And when we do ask the question of, is there a budget? Oftentimes the answer is, well, we know how much money we have, but we don't really have a written down budget. So we're going to talk today to all of you about what we refer to as an opinion of probable cost. It's a fancy word for budgets. It's also referred to as OPC. It's just lingo that's used in the healthcare business or arena, if you will, for budget development. So your budget's comprised of many parts. As you can see the note here, it's important to capture all of them to avoid what we refer to as budget busters. And believe me, a budget buster is a very easy thing to see, to have occur, and then to have to scramble and wonder what it is you're going to do to get back on track. Allow me just to briefly share with you a little bit about this slide before we move on. This slide is, as you can see, denotes the ACOS code. I'm going to share with you things that are required, things that are not required. For example, the cost codes get into some detail. Various systems allow you to identify cost associated with codes that allows you to track, not only for the purpose of this particular project, but for future projects, for history, as well as for estimating moving forward. Second column, obviously, is description. It talks about several items we're going to be talking about today that describes your project in terms of cost that we feel need to be broken down. You're going to see a column that says original budget, a column that says change amount requested, a column that says current approved budget, and then notes. And believe me, the notes are important. But when we talk about the original budget, we always want to have what we refer to as a base budget. In other words, at the end of the day, when somebody says to you, did we meet the budget? Did we go over the budget? Were we under the budget? And you have to understand, or you have to know what the base budget was to begin with. And then you need to really manage and track your changes and your current approved dollar amount, so that at the end of the day, you really know, did we win, did we lose, or did we tie? So this is basically the format. Up at the very top, you see the project name, the proposal, the description. AHJ has to do with, AHJ has to do with authority having jurisdiction. So why is it important to fill this out? We talk about the rough order of magnitude, or the term ROM, which is a conceptual budget. But why is it important to fill this piece out? It's important for several reasons. As I mentioned to you, AHJ is the authority having jurisdiction. Why is that important? Well, there's actually two authorities that we deal with in skilled nursing or in assisted living. One is what used to be referred to as OSHPD, it's now referred to as HCI. And the other one is your local municipality, and that would be the city of or the county of, and then you can fill in the blank. And sometimes we use both. Why is that? Because there's planning involved. When you start talking about the exterior of your facility, the interior could be HCI, and because we are doing things to the outside of our building, the city of would like to know what it is we're doing, the planning department, and we may be dealing with both. A start date is very important. What start date do we put in there? Do we put a contractual start date? Do we put estimated start date? Do we put what? And that's something that you will have to determine. And then, of course, we got targeted completion date and then duration. And duration is kind of important for a number of reasons. It's going to allow you to see how much money you spend over time, cash flow. You can even develop metrics from that. So this information, though, seems to be minor on your form, plays a very important role in the project itself. This particular page breaks it down a little bit further. So we oftentimes refer to the OPC in chunks or sections. And this particular section is going to refer to soft costs. So what are soft costs? Well, let me tell you what a hard cost is, and then you'll kind of understand how we develop a soft cost. And we'll get to that in a moment, but I just want to mention that the hard cost deals with construction. So now let's focus on soft costs. And that is the architect costs, the owner, consultants, the permits, the fees, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these. Cost engineer, project management services, pre-construction, testing and inspection, and capital interest. We may not go much into capital interest, but we'll touch on it a little bit. So the project needs a design professional, and we need to go find that design professional. That individual will not only bring to you his or her costs, but they will also have consultants. For example, they may need mechanical, they may need electrical, they may need plumbing consultants. So you're going to see a budget or a cost associated with that. And in the notes, you can see that it says A&E fees, architect and engineering fees. Owner consultants. There are consultants other than design professionals and other than project managers that the owner may require on the project. There might be too many to identify right now, but it could be anything from an equipment vendor to a materials, furniture. It could be, quite frankly, it could even be a sub consultant to design. There's a number of consultants that we could put in there, but it just gives you consultant allowances, the opportunity to capture those fees. We want to make sure we capture permit fees, or it says here permits and fees, but permit fees, and it's not an easy thing to do. For example, if you're dealing with HCI, or formerly known as OSHPD, the permit fees are a percentage of the construction cost. So when you're dealing with skilled nursing facilities, the permit fee is 1.5% of the estimated cost of construction. So it's easily determined, and it's reconciled at the end of the project. If you happen to go over by more than 5%, then you will owe the authority having jurisdiction additional fees. If you happen to go under by 5%, then the authority having jurisdiction will reimburse your fees. And if you believe that, I've never seen that happen, but the code and the law says that they are required to do so. You have cost engineer, or what we refer to as estimator costs. Oftentimes they'll bring an estimator in depending on the size of the project. And let's stop here for a moment and talk about the size of the project. So when we're talking about a greenfield, we're talking about a brand new building on a vacant lot or a developed lot that we're going to put a new building on. That's called greenfield, ground up. And more often than not, there you will see a cost estimator line item on there for that type of a project, because we're talking millions. Then let's go to the other extreme. You have a facility that has a new roof that they want to put on the building. And so that roof is going to cost you, let's say, thousands, maybe a couple $100,000, maybe as much as $400,000. So you can see the difference in cost, but regardless, you're going to have estimating costs that you're going to identify for the size of the project that you have. You have project management services. Now, there are times where a facility or an owner will say, well, why do we need a project manager? And we will tell you that you need a project manager because they understand the nuances of managing your project from the beginning all the way through the end, and all of the components. If you picture a pipeline of work that needs to be done in your project, and all of the things that need to be introduced in that pipeline during the life of that project, there is a lot. And it only takes missing one or two to really skew the project, either from a schedule, from a budget, or from just a number of areas where it can be very concerning to the owners and the money that you have to put up to do a particular project. So you really want to consider hiring a project management service. The fees for something like that vary depending on the size of the project, but it's minuscule compared to the potential for error that you will see or that could occur in a project that would be very costly. You have pre-construction. Pre-construction is the idea or the thought that you're going to bring people out in advance to do things to help you identify all those costs. We have in the note sections electrical reads or load readings. If we're doing a project of some size that requires what we call load readings and understanding what your facility in terms of power is using, you want to understand that. Site investigations, just looking at the site in general. And the last one in this particular example is air readings. What you will see a term or hear a term called tabs. And basically it's air balancing the system, pre-reading your air conditioning. In other words, before you start a project, you want to know how much air is being distributed in your facility, because when we're done remodeling this, you're going to have a certain amount of air distributed again, and you want to make sure you're correct. So we want to pre-read, and then we want to post-read. The pre-read would be pre-construction related costs. There's going to be testing and inspection, either from the agency having jurisdiction, in this case, HCI, where the owner has to pay for that individual or individual firm to test and inspect along the life of the project. Or if it's local municipality, there are certain milestones where the local municipality, be it the city or the county, will want to come out and look at the project, either framing, concrete, electrical, mechanical, or plumbing. And then, of course, there's interest, capital interest, right? You can't not think about that there's going to be interest costs on any money that you're going to be using for this particular project. And we won't go deep into that one. So we'll just go ahead and pass on that, and we'll move on to the next slide. So continuing on with, I'm going to continue to just refer to the opinion of probable costs, or OPC. And here we have construction costs. These are the hard costs that are going to affect your particular project. So how do we achieve or get those costs? Well, we're going to go and seek proposals from firms that are qualified to do the work that we are asking them to do, because not everybody can do it, but everybody will say they can. And in the healthcare arena, it requires a very unique set of skills, slightly different, sometimes very vastly different than in the residential or the commercial industry. So you want to make sure that you get very good proposals from contractors or from firms that you're going to be using, even design, whoever. You want to get very precise, very clear, very detailed proposals to determine if they are the right firm for you. Do we want to get more than one? Certainly we want to get more than one. And I want to share with you that it takes time and energy for a contractor to develop proposals and estimates for a project. So I would not recommend too many depending on the size of the project, but anyways, I would certainly get more than one proposal. And then those proposals, eventually one is going to be selected and it's going to turn into a contract. And we have been sharing with LeadingAge on our past presentations the importance of proposals and the importance of contracts for projects as small as replacing a water heater to building a new facility. And it's the contract is there to protect the contractor and the owner in the event that the project could go sideways. And then let's not forget tax. When we started filling in these descriptions on construction cost, the cost of capital to do this particular project, the expense, however you determine or your system determines expense, we want to capture those in the original budget so that we can eventually track it as it changes and as we come up with a final approved budget. But most importantly, don't forget tax. Wherever we are, we're going to have to think about that. Continuing on with the OPC, or the opinion of probable cost, is medical equipment. And this medical equipment can be significant, it can be minor, but it's medical equipment nonetheless. And in order to really be successful in the planning of the equipment required, you may want to get planning services, and there is a cost associated with that. You want to look at the inventory, or you want to inventory your equipment and its conditions. Many times an owner or a client will say, well, why do we need to buy new when we have all of this existing equipment here already within the facility? And a few things will occur. One is the equipment is not as in good a shape as you may have thought it was, or it could be okay. But I think sometimes what happens is that when you do a new project and you renovate a new space and you got the smell of new paint and new carpet and new ceilings and new everything, and then you bring in old equipment or old furniture or whatever, it sometimes doesn't sit well. And so you decide, let's go out and get new equipment, and there's a cost to pay. There's a capital cost, obviously, to pay, and let's not forget the tax. So in the capital cost, you'll see in our notes, we talk about freight and rigging. There's a lot more to it than just the dollar amount that you have to pay for the piece of equipment or the piece of furniture. So we want to make sure that we capture all that. IT costs. This is a very challenging one that everybody has to deal with, and one that very few people are very familiar with it, right? Information technology, IT services. And oftentimes the systems will have internal IT, internal information technology departments. And there is still a cost to using, whether you're using your own or you're using external, there's still a cost to it. And you want to track that. Again, we're tracking this not only to make sure that we're paying for it, to make sure that everything is okay, but we're tracking it for future use on metrics to determine how successful we were or we are on our project. I say here vendor or internal labor costs, right? Because we could have an internal department, but we may still want to use third-party vendors to come in because our internal may be limited in their ability to do certain things. Infrastructure, IT equipment is different than IT devices. Computers, phones. It's interesting when you talk about IT and you talk about the various applications. I did not know that there was a difference between, computers and phones early on. I found out that there's a difference between software and hardware, right? And everybody has a specific expertise in that area. So you want to make sure that you capture it all properly. And when I say software, it could be that you're providing hardware, computers for your particular project, but you may also need software to address the department's future needs, and you want to make sure that you got that captured. And again, we don't want to forget the tax. tax, tax, tax. So earlier I talked about equipment and I referenced furniture, but specifically we have what we refer to as FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, right? In this case, it says miscellaneous equipment, but furniture design may be required. And let me stop here just for a second because we've made note of this in many slides when we talk about labor costs. Understand that there are labor costs and there are equipment costs or material costs. And oftentimes, or I shouldn't say oftentimes, but many times the labor cost can exceed the cost of the equipment or furniture if it's not planned properly. So you'll see that we're showing furniture design may be required, which would be another third-party vendor, labor costs for delivery, furniture and miscellaneous equipment, and again, tax. Do we need a move vendor? Do we need to bring a vendor in to get the equipment and furniture in, get the old out? We just recently had a project where we had to store equipment, and it was a rather sizable project while we remodeled, and we brought in a third-party vendor to do the work for us. So you want to capture all those costs associated with furniture planning, furniture and fixtures, and again, sales tax. So continuing on with the OPC, we got contingency and escalation, and this is a very important piece to a project. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this one because we show, well, let's talk about escalation because escalation is real, right? We're all kind of learning about escalation right now. We're living in the middle of it, right? We're living in a moving target, if you will, the cost of goods and what those costs of goods are going to be during the life of your project. And so we try to put a percentage in there and we try to ask ourselves, well, what will the escalation cost be for this particular project? And in order to understand, or in order to really target the cost of escalation, we might need to know how long is this project going to take. For example, if this project is only going to take a month, escalation may not be an issue. But if this project is going to take a year or 2 years, then escalation can be real, and you need to plug in a percentage for that. And oftentimes we will look at midpoint of the project to try to capture a realistic, what we can expect escalation to be for that particular size project. Contingency is hedging your bets, so to speak. You always want to have a contingency, and the percentage required will decrease as you firm up your budget. So what does that mean? Well, if we go back to our design, our architect and our engineers, they're going to start developing a design on your particular project, and it's going to be a conceptual design. And there's phases that this design goes through. And there's what they call schematic design, or SDs, and there's design development, which is DDs, and then there's construction design, which are the design documents that then get submitted for plan review, get permitted, and we build by. And so those three phases, along with the contractor who comes in and says, I believe that this project is going to cost X, and we don't know if there's going to be variables introduced, foreseen and unforeseen, into the project during the life of construction. So when you look at the design and you look at the construction, you want to put a contingency factor on there. So we're showing right now 20% contingency. And I'll tell you what the problem is with 20% contingency, that the owner on a project will oftentimes want to reduce that number because they believe that that money is going to come back into their coffers. And they're right. That money will come back into their coffers. So why remove it too early? So what we like to do is we like to start off with a high contingency, and as the design documents begin to get honed and sharpened, we can begin to see and estimate. Remember, we talked about pre-construction. We can begin to pre-construct with better numbers that will allow us to bring that project contingency down slightly. And as we continue to look at the drawings, as they continue to be more honed and become construction documents, we may be able to take that contingency down even lower. We could conceivably go into a project of a normal size in skilled nursing, excluding a new facility. We ought to be able to go in with a 10% contingency. I don't know that I would go in lower, but I've seen owners take the contingency out in advance of the project being done, and then we have to try to get through with less contingency. And how is that used? For example, we're doing plumbing work, and we have to excavate below the grade for whatever reason, and we find out that the pipe is cast iron and very brittle because these facilities were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it's not uncommon for a contractor to excavate, and with each shovel, you can literally break off that cast iron piping to the point where you may find yourself going back 5, 10, 15 feet. And there's going to have to be some dollars somewhere to pay for that additional work. So the contractor is going to come back to you with a change order of sorts, and they're going to want additional dollars for the additional work that may have been unforeseen. And that money is earmarked, or I should say that money is as a result of the owner, changes that occurred as a result of the owner's responsibility. Even though the owner didn't know that the pipe was bad, it was the owner's facility, right? Another change could be maybe code related or something from the agency that requires us to make some changes. And the contractor says, I need more money. Again, it wasn't the contractor's fault. And so we have to then identify the cost. And in both cases, we have to move money from project contingency out of contingency and into the budget so that it can be used for the project. So it's important to track it. So it's important to have an original budget contingency number and then watch that number move during the life of the project. And so you can see the percentage required will decrease as you firm up your budget. And as the note says, escalation is real. You can't get away from it. So that pretty much covers budgets for a project. And I want to, before we go and talk a little bit about the upcoming presentations in the future, I want to just share with you the importance of what a budget will do for you and for your facility in allowing you or giving you knowledge for future projects. Because now we've tracked a project and we've gathered numbers related to plumbing, to mechanical, to electrical, to a host of elements. And we've created what we refer to as metrics for future work. Because a budget or an estimate is only as good as the best numbers you have, right? And if you capture these numbers and you do a future project, then you can have that discussion that says, well, do you remember when we did this, it cost us this much? Then we can take into consideration escalation. We can take into consideration a number of variables and come up with a pretty good number that will help us create our next and new budget. So we always say that the budget probably is one of the most important elements of a project, because without it, you're lost. And with it, there's a level of security that it's kind of like a roadmap. You know where you're going along with the drawings. So never take a project budget lightly and pay close attention to that with the details required. Having said all that, as you can see, our next upcoming presentation is going to be drainage, landscaping, and parking lots. Probably very, very important, because nothing does damage worse to a facility than water, poor drainage, poor landscaping, and it affects your parking lots. With that, I want to thank you and I appreciate the opportunity to share budgets with you.
Thank you, Walt. Another great session topics. What's the best way to reach you if people have questions after today's presentation?
Certainly. So in the beginning, you saw the stall companies, and we can be reached at our website is www.thestallcompanies.com. But you can reach us through our website. You can also call us at 916-635-8855. And we'll be more than happy to help you in any way possible with your current or future projects.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We look forward to having you again next month as an expert speaker. And I hope you have a wonderful day or afternoon, depending on where you're watching from. Everyone, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.